Okay, fine. Fair enough. So this presentation is over 4 years in the making, and I'm very excited it's happening today. There's a bit of a backstory, and here's the backstory. 4 years ago, when I was club president, I got an email from somebody I didn't recognize from the city of Abbotsford asking if the Abbotsford Rotary Club would consider volunteering for a park cleanup, which was pretty standard stuff, as anyone that's been president knows. What was unusual about this email is I didn't recognize the name of the park. So I put the name of the park and comma Abbotsford in Google Maps, and there it was, except I still didn't recognize the park or any of the surrounding streets. So I started to rollerball my mouse back, and suddenly the red pin jumped from the city of Abbotsford to the continent of Australia. And I thought, silly Google, and I scrolled it forward and scrolled it back, and I discovered that there is a city, a suburb of in Australia called Abbotsford. This was troubling to me. My response in the email was that I would guarantee 60 volunteers for the park cleanup as long as the city paid for transportation, which I told them I thought conservatively they could do for under $1,500 Canadian. I never heard back, but it did create a bit of a problem for me personally, in that, as many of you know, I do a lot of speaking at other Rotary clubs, and I always start my presentations off the same way. I ask the groups, what's the #1 Rotary club in the world? And inevitably you get the answer of Chicago. If you do the presentation in Canada, they say Winnipeg because they confuse #1 club with first club. Most of them say their own club, and I tell them, no, they're all wrong. The #1 Rotary club in the world is my club, the Abbotsford Rotary Club. I get eye rolls and groans and boos. And then we four-way test that statement, and I say Abbotsford is the #1 Rotary club in the world alphabetically. But Abbotsford, Australia, technically would be ahead of Abbotsford, Canada. And so suddenly I found myself wondering if I'd been failing the four-way test. I mean, I know I failed the four-way test on a daily basis, but in that particular instance. So fast forward to the pandemic, where we become familiar with Zoom and the opportunities it presents, and we have presentations from Africa and the US, and I get handed the job of finding speakers, and I thought, I'd really like to know what an Abbotsford, Australia Rotary Club meeting is. And so it is with great pleasure and 4 years of anticipation that I introduce you all to Mr. Bruce Shaw. Bruce is a barrister, which I think is lawyer. Am I close? Yep. Okay. I'm trying to translate from Aussie to Canadian. He lives in Yarra, Victoria, of which Abbotsford is a suburb. He is, and I want to take time so this sinks in. He is their past club president, their current club president, and their president-elect. So when we as board members ask you as club members consider serving for the Abbotsford Rotary Club of British Columbia, Canada, understand that there are far worse places you could be asked to serve in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Bruce has a background in construction, industrial relations in buildings. He's been a Rotarian since 1997, which means that he's entering his 25th year, a quarter of a century as a Rotarian. And again, I will stress, it's 5 a.m. where he is. Can we please give Mr. Shaw a very warm Abbotsford, Canada welcome?
Well, thank you for that. Can you hear me? I've lost the sound here. So I now can't hear any of you.
You're live, Bruce. I can hear you on Zoom.
I now can. Sorry about that. Yeah, well, what Matt's got scrolling in the background are photos that I sent in no particular order of events that have occurred essentially in the last 12 months at our club or by our club. That one, for example, on the screen right now is only last Wednesday. That's our district governor making a presentation at her annual visit, which this year she decided to do on a cluster basis, and 4 of our clubs got together and we had her there. To start at the start, though, I am the president of the Rotary Club of Collingwood, and Abbotsford is at least a postal district within the Collingwood area. Since the Rotary Club was formed, the city of Melbourne, well, not the city, but the region of Melbourne has gone through many changes of administration. And right now, there is no city of Collingwood, there is a city of Yarra, which incorporates the old area, Collingwood area, which, as I said, also incorporated the suburb of Abbotsford. The Collingwood Town Hall, for example, is in fact in Abbotsford, as are the main features such as the home football ground, or what was the home football ground of the Collingwood Australian Rules Football Club, which is notorious, I would say, around Melbourne, apart from those who actually support it. What's on the screen there right now was a group of us who went to, thank you, who went to the district conference at Albury, and they're you can see our members are fairly young. The little one in the front's not a member. She's obviously the daughter of a member. We do have, and I'll go into that in a moment, a fairly broad ethnic background, and that reflects the area in which we operate. The Rotary Club of Collingwood was formed in September 30th, 1950, chartered, I should say, in September 30th, 1959. Which makes it coming up to 63 years old. It's been through a whole series of rises and falls in membership numbers. Right now, it's probably in a fall, but although I do have, in fact, we're introducing a new member to us, our people, our next meeting. So we're sort of fighting back, and we do. We in fact meet now in keeping with the where our people live and where they come from. Only a handful live in the actual Collingwood Abbotsford area. The rest of us don't live that far away. I'm actually transmitting from South Bank, which is on the opposite side of the CBD from Abbotsford, but only a matter of 4 or 5 kilometres. The club, when it was formed, as most clubs in 1959 would have been, was very much a club. As well, are all vocationally based, as you would all know. The area of Collingwood and Abbotsford in particular was a light industrial area. It was mainly involved in clothing and shoes. Shoe manufacture and boot manufacture was a big thing. There's quite a large building which is now called the Neighbourhood Justice Centre, being taken over for law, not so much enforcement, but rehabilitation enforcement, I think you'd call it. It was originally the Victorian boot factory or boot trade school, and our membership was drawn from the owners of those sorts of industries. All of that, of course, is gone now in the and has been going since the 1970s or 80s. It's now very much, on the one hand, it's a dormitory suburb and it's become gentrified. At the northern end at Clifton Hill, it is quite a affluent area. Even little old workers' cottages in the Abbotsford Collingwood area now command rather handsome prices. But on the other hand, which is relevant to us as a Rotary Club, there are in the city of Yarra, not quite in Abbotsford, but just across the road in Collingwood and in Fitzroy, there are high-rise public housing apartments, which get, at this stage, they've get a lot of South Sudanese and Somali refugees find their first home in Australia there. So they create a need for assistance and for integration and for support, which we are able to give them. Our club, the history of our club was that it early on had some very enterprising people who in fact set up a program of purchasing at wholesale and distributing Christmas puddings and Christmas cakes Australia-wide through a clever network, which raised over the years a lot of money for Rotary, generally, not so much for us. In fact, the reason we eventually wound it up was we worked out it was costing us about $10,000 a year and making lots of money for everybody else. So we decided really that was getting our capital, which was used to fund it, was going to run out. So we pulled the pin on that and invested the money that we had from it, and that being wisely invested, fortunately, even in this era of almost zero bank interest, the asset managers are getting a return on that money every year of between 5 and 7%. So it's keeping us going. Our main activity, fundraising activity, really is so far we're this last few years we make money for other people rather than for ourselves. We conduct, for example, a weekly barbecue at a sporting oval in just north of the suburb of Abbotsford in Fairfield, but every cent from that we donate to the club on whose behalf we conduct it. And some of those pictures that you came up showed those kids. That photo, for example, if I hold that for a second, that's perhaps don't hold that one. But the next one that comes up from the Vietnamese festival in North Richmond is part of a project that we got involved with. As our membership was sinking, it occurred to me that and given the area at that stage in the 1990s, was very much the Somalis and South Sudanese hadn't arrived, but the Vietnamese who'd come in Australia en masse in the 1980s were living in Collingwood, Richmond, Abbotsford area, and I thought we should try and get ourselves involved with that community if we're going to survive. That photo there is the Yarra Jets barbecue. And this one comes up a bit later where you see the uniform the kids are wearing, which has got the Rotary logo and our name on the front. That's because we give them, apart from raising about $9,000 through that barbecue every year for them, we also give them $5,000 a year towards their operating costs and their promotion, particularly their promotion among the public housing where kids who otherwise wouldn't be able to play soccer get, and they're all crazy soccer mad, of course, from Africa, if they get the opportunity to join in with an actual competition club instead of just kicking a ball around in the schoolyard after school, which is what they otherwise used to do. Wendy Tang on our right on that photo is also a past president. She was the one that was going to perhaps join us, depending if the kids woke her up in time this morning, but she obviously that hasn't occurred yet. But she's been a great member, and she was one of the early ones that I was able to get in from the Vietnamese community. And what we did to get ourselves involved in that, we are fortunate in a street called Victoria Street, all British Empire stuff, of course, in inner Melbourne. Victoria Street in both Abbotsford and North Richmond. It's the border road between those areas. They have a Vietnamese festival. It became very much a Vietnamese enclave in Melbourne. It's less so now, although they did spend a lot of time and money, and we donated quite a bit actually towards creating an archway, a highly modern archway to enter the street, which symbolises a Vietnamese boat and Vietnamese hats and such, which is actually quite interesting. I haven't got a photo of that, unfortunately. I decided we should try and get involved with them, and it was fortuitously I lived in North Richmond at the time and used to eat quite a lot in Victoria Street. It was a famous Vietnamese eating place. Still has some very good Vietnamese restaurants in it, but it's become a bit more multicultural now too, as the ethnic mix around it is changed. I decided we should get involved with the Vietnamese community. I fortunately had a young lad who was at the time, in fact, I was at his 18th birthday, but so he was only young. He's now 45, and he's effectively become a son to me. So, and his two children call me Papa Beard. So I'm sort of in the Vietnamese community. And their culture, of course. In fact, the Vietnamese language only has one word for friend, and not range of friends. So once you go beyond normal friend, you pick up a family title. So you either become what translates in English to us or to uncle, or what translates to dad. And when young Dan, who I don't think there's a photo of him in this whole collection because he currently lives in Perth with his wife and kids. But when young Dan, for the day he called me Dad, I was quite taken aback as I thought I was one of the boys. But when I looked in the mirror one morning, I thought, well, you're bloody lucky he didn't call you Granddad. Now, just joining us is Dan Tang, who's our club secretary, who's in Mexico City, I think. So it's closer to your time zone. In fact, I think he's a couple of hours later than you, than I am. So we didn't send him there just to keep track of you guys. But when he was there, we thought we might as well utilise him if possible. So he's probably even worse. As you can see, he's much younger than me, and he's probably given up a fine afternoon to join us from Mexico City, whereas I can always go back to bed after this. It hasn't really affected my day at all. But from that group, we Dan. And Dan is in fact Wendy's brother, so that's a bit of a family affair there. But Wendy hasn't been woken up, Dan. We gather from other kids yet. She did suggest to me last night that she would try and join us if she's going to be woken up. And we got ourselves involved in the Vietnamese community. As I've said, now that's the Yarra Jets group. There's again I was looking at little kids there, but the little girl on my left, on the right-hand side, is Wendy's daughter. A little boy they've all disappeared now. But the little boy, dark hair, is a lad by the name of Devante. He's in fact from Timor-Leste. Well, that's where he was born, and we did get quite a few people in Australia from Timor-Leste. This one was taken, I think it was taken last year, because the little lad further, the fairer haired boy, his name is Zach, he's currently hit the adolescent growth spurt, and he's now as tall as me, which doesn't make him particularly tall, by the way, but it's a lot taller than he is there. But that is the Yarra Jets group, and the kids do join us and help sometimes if they want to. We let them help us with selling the barbecue. We're much more technical now. This year we've moved to electronic funds transfer, so we can accept cards. So and it's very handy having kids that age because they actually understand what's going on. Whereas I have to look at and ask somebody at time and when it refuses to put the correct amount of money in. Our club, we got into, so we got involved with the Vietnamese community. Our membership has picked up. It's also youthened. If I did make a comment at the cluster meeting last Wednesday night that Collingwood is still endeavouring to get younger members, and I made the point that when I finally shuffle off, our average age will probably reduce to the lowest in Rotary in Australia. But well, having said that, I mentioned we've got a new member coming to meet us next week, who is he's got 35 years experience at work, so he's probably getting closer to my age. So the ancient people are fighting back. That's Wendy, and on the Michael Lapina, you can probably read his name. He's the district governor nominee, I think is the title. I don't know if you do that in Canada, but we seem to have them lined up many years in advance. So it creates a real continuity. Michael is actually an opera singer, although he's not sort of active, but he works with Opera Australia and does occasionally when I don't think it requires drink. He does actually sing and sing rather well at district functions. The club, our activities now as I said, fundraising is not our longest suit, but we are fortunate having assets which, as long as we meet the requirements of using the charitable ones for charitable purposes, and they're covered by a trust deed, so we can't do anything else with them. And the administrative ones, which came from the administrative side of our old plum pudding project, we can use on administration and such. We're not the wealthiest club in Australia, but we're certainly not the poorest. So we are able to make donations, make contributions to the community. Our involvement with the Vietnamese community has continued. That's the Victoria Street Festival, which for the last 2 years has been somewhat affected by COVID and COVID lockdowns, but it hasn't been, it never ceased. And it's planned this year, although they're debating, I know, within their group as to whether it'll be as large as normal, or perhaps curtailed about half the size. Either way, it is a great multicultural festival. Certainly the local politicians who speak at it claim it's the largest multicultural festival in Australia. But I've got no idea if it's right or not, but it does give us quite a bit of exposure. And we, as I said, we get members from it. And I don't know how you find it over there, but over here, which is what you want to hear about rather than the history of our club, we find it difficult getting members. I think all clubs in our district are finding it difficult getting members, except perhaps the Rotary Club of Melbourne, which is to take up the Matt's point earlier, is the oldest Rotary Club in Australia. It was formed, I think, in 1921. I might be coming a couple of years off there. And there were other clubs around Australia. But I was actually a visiting member of the Rotary Club of Townsville in North Queensland for about 5 years. And it was indeed formed in 1924. So Rotary, when it came to Australia, spread fairly quickly across the country. We now meet fortnightly for a proper formal dinner meeting. We obviously see each other, certainly Dan and I do, every Sunday morning at the Yarrajits barbecue, and we have other helpers come on there to help us, and we get together in other situations quite a lot. There's a small active group of about 7 or 8 of us that really do most of the work. But if you call upon, we've got 14 members, and if you call upon any of them, they will assist to do something that it requires a direct telephone call straight to them, and obviously an activity they can find time for. Apart from the Vietnamese festival and Yarrajits, we support strongly a group called Happy Football Cambodia Australia, which is a strange name, and but that's set up that way for political reasons, and they conduct a program in Vietnam, in both Phnom Penh and Siem Reap, where they take generally disadvantaged kids, and if you're disadvantaged in Cambodia, you're certainly disadvantaged by our standards, the standards in Australia or Canada, and they run a program which is whilst it's based around football, being soccer over there, it is not entirely that way. They guide the kids, they mentor them, they help them find jobs, and I did have the pleasure in 2015 of going to what they call the Reunion Cup, which was a whole lot of their teams that they enter in the Homeless World Cup every year, and they ran a lightning premiership there, and it was great to see the kids, who many of whom are no longer kids, of course, but to see them operating there. But that shot is from Happy Football Cambodia. They're in Melbourne once a year. They run a lightning premiership to raise money. As I said, the boy that his hand I was shaking there is indeed from the Sudanese community, from the high rise, and they enter an entire team, and they won. As I said, we have been able to get kids from that high rise to join in with the Yarrajits to actually join in proper competition. as you can see in the background, things are stirring here in Melbourne at what the time is now, about 5:30 a.m. Our meetings, we tend to not have formalised meetings. So far I've noticed you so far have really sung the national anthem and then done club notices. We don't sing the national anthem anymore. We used to when I first joined, but actually it's a legacy of one of my stints as president. I thought, well, Rotary is after all Rotary International, so why sing the national anthem of Australia? There is no world national anthem, so let's make it what it's intended to be, in my view. And we don't have any nationalistic type functions at all. Don't think we even own an Australian flag now, but we used to. We stopped. I also stopped the concept. I don't know what you do yet, because we're only attended this first part of your meeting, and if you've put me on to send everybody to sleep first, so I don't know what will happen at your meeting, but we don't have the sergeant at arms session and things like that, because it's to me they were always essentially in jokes, which might be good in a small community, but when you're trying to get people out of a larger community of a place like Melbourne and trying to drag people in, everybody just doesn't know everybody else. So we dropped that. And I must say, our club at the time, even though I said they were all businessmen, they were pretty tight with their money. If they got a fine, they'd put their finger in their fob pocket and pull out coins which are no longer minted in Australia because they're so small in value. They'd pull out coins and put them in. Whereas I remember when I was at the Rotary Club of Townsville, the sergeant used to fine people an actual amount of money. So your fine is $20, but if you're prepared to sing a song which he would nominate, you can reduce that to $5. So I recall one occasion where they had the Solicitor General of Australia and a local judge had to sing up. I did it my way to avoid their $20 fine, but which was great fun. But Collingwood never got to that stage, and judging by the way they used to sing the national anthem, it wouldn't have been a pleasant experience if they had been made to sing songs anyway. Our meetings we do conduct there at that location that's on the screen now. That's the Kelvin Club. It's in the CBD of Melbourne. The reason we've moved out of Abbotsford as such, it's only about a kilometre and a half away anyway, but the reason we've done that is because we're having trouble with our small membership finding a location where they didn't insist on us paying for a minimum number of people. And whilst sometimes we get 15 people at lunch, it was a lunchtime club then, sometimes we get people at lunch or dinner. If occasion occurred where only a handful turned up, we still had to pay for 15. And the Kelvin Club are quite happy if we have one person. Pardon me, if we have one person, they'll cop that. If we have 10 people, they'll cop that. And if they have 20, they can, being a Wednesday night now, they such that we can, they can fit us in even if we turn up with a larger group. So that's why we meet there at this point. We are on the lookout for a similar location in the Abbotsford area, but there isn't one immediately available, so we're unable to do that. So apart from Happy Football Cambodia, apart from the Vietnamese community, Yarra Jets, we also supporting our local school, Collingwood College, which is strictly speaking on the boundary of the old boundary of Collingwood and Abbotsford. It is a school that runs from prep up to year 12, although in the last year, their years 11 and 12 are being combined on a different campus with Fitzroy High School. We're fortunate in the last year, a teacher who's also the year 8 to 10 coordinator has joined our club as a member, and that's given us a real good link there. And we've supported kids going to the Muna, the Model United Nations Assembly, They had here on Nelson Mandela Day, there was a forum for young people, which they spoke and asked questions, held at the Parliament, the State Parliament House here in Melbourne. And we were able to get 4 kids from Collingwood College to go to that. They had a great move where that inspired us to set up an interactive club, and that is now, we've had an introductory meeting out at the Collingwood College, which was attended by, in fact, the 3 on the screen there, actually Wendy and Michael Lau on my right there on the left of the picture, who's Wendy's husband, who's also a member of the club. We all attended, as did Dan. And it's very successful. Kids seem to be very interested, and the fact that they've been involved in both MUNA and the Nelson Mandela Day are able to inspire other kids to get interested. And that particular club is at the point, it's not ready to be chartered yet, but they are going through the process of electing officials and officers. And Collingwood College is, I assume, most schools in Melbourne are there. So the Collingwood College is a school where the kids themselves at the elections for their student representative council are very active, and those that miss out are very disappointed. So the school is rather hopeful that those that miss out on that will become officers of the Interact Club. And we also, there have been some shots coming up of me talking to a lot of little kids. That's at the Abbotsford Primary School, which is celebrating its 145th anniversary this year, which, in fact, as a child, I attended from prep to 4th grade. I must say, the assembly where the teacher, the principal, explained to the kids that I was an alumni of the school and explained what an alumni was, and introduced them to the fact that it was the school's 145th anniversary. I'm sure the kids thought I was there in the first year, actually, of the school's operation. Later on, when I was wandering around the school, it was on the Friday after what was called here Anzac Day, which is our main war memorial day, which had been on the Monday, and so I was in the kids' mind. So I had kids coming up asking if I'd been in the Second World War, which I was a bit one flattered, but also a bit taken aback. They thought I was that old, but never mind. But it was an excellent day, and the photos are of another day. Well, the photos are partly of that day that show me with the microphone with the school in the background. As you can see from when it comes up on the screen again, if it does, you'll see that the school is indeed a very old building, but it has been, as all the schools in that area in the last 10 years, completely refurbished inside. So it's very interesting what's these kids, and we're thinking of, and we have looked for things to do to help that school. It like all schools, it needs money. Like all government schools, it needs money. But it's very well focused, and it's an interesting school also in that it's one of 15 bilingual schools in Melbourne, and its second language is Cantonese. And by bilingual schools, it doesn't mean they teach Cantonese kids in Cantonese. Every child, all the lessons are in 2 languages. It was quite actually interesting. Sit in the schoolyard of my own old school, attending an assembly in a language I had no idea what was going on, but the kids did, which was fortunate. And they did do it bilingually. So after a little while, I was able to understand what was happening. But it is a great initiative. There are only 2 Cantonese bilingual schools in Australia, the other one being only about 500 metres from that school, really, also in the North Richmond area. Now, I'm not sure, at the time when I come up here, at the time disappeared off my screen, so I won't bore you all totally to death. It might be wise if, in fact, I take questions and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. But that, Chris, you're the man in charge, I gather, from the label on the bottom of your picture. So maybe if you wish to go that way, we can head in that direction.
Yeah, let's start up a Q&A.
Yep.
Before we do that, we had a late arrival. Mr. Tang, who I believe is a member of the Collingwood Club, is off screen right now, but still in. So welcome to you, sir. Thank you for taking the time to join us from Mexico City. Questions from the in-person? Oh, sorry. Did Laura sneak in? Laura, hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Questions from the in-house group first. Seeing none, questions from the Zoomers. Mr. Squire.
Thank you. Hey, weekly barbecue. So, and want to make sure I heard that correctly. So every week you go to the sports field and you sell hamburgers and hot dogs and such?
Well, being Australia, we sell sausages, but essentially the same thing. We just sausages and bread. We also have a selection of soft drinks, which some that have got allegedly got fruit juice in them, but I think they might have been made near an orchard rather than actually have much fruit juice in them. But the parents direct their kids in that direction rather than Coke. But we sell those, and I said every cent goes to when I say every cent over and above the cost goes to the Yarra Jets Club. The answer is yes, every week. Yeah.
And so that's a lot of man hours to do. And is it the same people coming out, or like you mentioned that you're in contact with your meeting, so with your members, and it's a phone call to get them to come out. So is that an organization nightmare to do that every week?
This year hasn't been because the two people that do it every week are on your screen now. That's me and Dan.
Okay.
But when Dan's away in Mexico City, he was actually able to find a friend who was not even a Rotarian, who's so good. I can almost sleep in and turn up late, but I try and not do so. But who seems to have been taken up by it, and even the extent that he's organised his own private affairs after discovering that Dan wouldn't be back in Australia till next Monday. He even rearranged himself so he can attend the barbecue this Sunday. When we're stuck with only one of us, well, that's when we call on others, and we were able to get people to come for say a couple of hours at a time. So you cover it from say 8:30 in the morning to 10:30, and then somebody else comes at 10:30 and takes over till 1:30. We've got one member who just lives only by car or motorbike. He's a motorbike rider who only lives about 5 minutes drive from the ground too. So when we're called upon, we can need to call upon him. But it is a bit of a commitment, but it's one that's worked well this year, and for the last, in reality, we've been doing it for about 5 or 6 years, and we've been managed to muddle through, but generally by the phone call arrangement. This year, Dan has become Dan and I tend to cover it every week.
Okay, Aaron Flavel has a question, and then Alan has a question in the room.
Bruce, thank you so much for coming on. I'm interested in the numerous times you've referred to your membership situation, and I wondered if you had a plan for increasing your membership in the coming year or 2 or 3.
Well, the short answer is we don't have a written plan. We are constantly looking for new members. We are probably not as selective as Rotary clubs used to be. I mean, basically the criteria for joining Collingwood is if you're breathing, then you hit first base. But I find people who want to join Rotary already have the right approach. In this day and age, if people are going to join a service club, they know what they're in for, and they do it for that reason. I think there was an era some years ago where people might join Rotary for the status, so they wear the badge. But we find when we do get new members, they join us with great enthusiasm. But we're mainly doing it through the organisations we assist in trying to get parents involved from the soccer club, trying to get parents involved from the schools. It's hard work, as you know, and we fortunately, by doing the things we've done without being drawing ourselves to the attention of the community, we have picked up members, but we'd probably be getting at this stage, we may be getting 1 or 2 new members a year, which right now is fortunately more than covering attrition. But just we don't have a formal plan as such. Our district leadership team is great on formal plans, but I tend to think that there's sort of things that, for the most part, finish up in the waste paper bin. I mean, the proof of the pudding is actually getting members in, and that we are working on. So the short answer to your question is no, we don't, but we still get new members by the approach we're taking.
We have a couple of lawyers in the room that are enjoying the fact that you say the short answer is after the long answer. Alan, you have a question for our guest.
That microphone is turned off there. Still don't have him.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear.
Yeah, this is a memory for me. My wife and I went to Australia in about 1989, 1990 on a Rotary friendship tour. And it was a wonderful time. We had previously to that particular tour, we had been to South Africa. So there was a wonderful time in both countries. And then the year after the Australian tour, we did one of Canada. But I had no idea that there was an Abbotsford in Australia. Anyway, thanks very much, Bruce, for this presentation.
Now, while I suppose I shouldn't let it finish without doing the right thing by my own district here, and you may or may not be aware, I hope you're aware, that the World Rotary Conference is in Melbourne next year, in May next year. We are involved in organising a night for the home hosting rather than people doing it at home. We're doing it at one of the clubs. We were originally planning to have it at the Kelvin Club, which you've seen on the screen several times this morning, but this afternoon, I should say. But we discovered that, to our embarrassment, that on Wednesday night the Kelvin Club is not really accessible, which is in the sense that there's no vertical transport. So, we had the embarrassment of a member of one of our clubs who's got very, very bad multiple sclerosis, was unable to really get to the meeting. So we've abandoned that idea. We've currently got 2 alternatives in the pipeline. We've got to make a decision in the middle of September as to which of those 2 we pick up. But we'd love to see as many of you as possible who could get to Melbourne. I've been to Canada a couple of times, but I never do a Rotary meeting, I might say. This is the first Canadian Rotary meeting I've attended, but I have been to a couple of American Rotary meetings, but they're on a cruise ship, which was sort of an unusual experience, and the average age was even older than most of our Rotary clubs. Of course, it was amazing that they were still breathing, some of them, but it was quite entertaining. They were all very nice, friendly people. But so please, if you're able to come to Melbourne next year, do so. I know they're planning on a very big program. Right now, they're upset. They've got, as they always do with Rotary conventions, they've got about 10,000, mostly from the United States, already booked, and they've only got about 300 or 400 from our own district at this point. But that will no doubt change as the day gets close, as the time gets closer. So please give that consideration and come along if you can. We'd be delighted to see you all.
Thank you very much, Bruce. My name is Doris. I'm the past president of this club, and it's my honor to thank you formally for taking the time and getting up at the crack of dawn, or even before the sun probably, to join us this morning. We really appreciate you taking that time, and our way to thank you is that we make a donation on your behalf with a group called Food for the Hungry. We support a young lady in Ethiopia named Jeanette Timketa-Dule, and we have a certificate that I'm sure Bruce will be able to get to you somehow to formally thank you for being here and sharing information about your club. It's always good to hear from other Rotarians around the world. My father was a Rotarian, and when we went on vacation, we had to go to a Rotary meeting every week because he needed to have perfect attendance. So that's gone the way of the dodo bird, but it's good to get to know some other Rotarians around the world. So thank you very much.